Welcome to the DevOps Essentials for Data Engineering Lab. It should start you on the course agenda page. Here, we will see a couple folders. We have the course notebooks, the source, and the test. And we'll dive into these throughout this course in the demos and labs. But to start, you'll want to go into course notebooks, and for this first demo, MO2-CD. We go to course notebooks, CI. And the first demo we're going to complete is modularizing PySpark code. This demo is required, so if you skip this demo, this will set up your environment, and if you skip this demo, most of these will not work. So let's select 2.1, and just for some additional real estate, I will close some of those. And again, this is modularizing PySpark code. Again, there's some notes in here for you that you do have to execute this lab to just kind of set up your entire environment, which we'll talk about in a second. Now, we are going to use Classic Compute. Serverless should work as well, but we're just going to use Classic. So I will go to the top here, and if you go to More, and we select, this will take about a few minutes if this is the first time you've opened the lab. This does time out after about an hour and a half or 2 hours, but it is just a Classic Compute cluster. Yours will be named slightly different. I will select mine and then click Attached. And then during editing, we're waiting for this to start up, so you can just skip this section until the cluster starts. So we'll just cut it out. I'll wait here on the same screen. All right, we can see my cluster has started, so we are good to go. And then again, just some notes, you do have to execute this cell. I will execute it. It should take about 2 minutes to run. So let me execute this cell, and we'll cover what it does after it completes. But in the end, it's going to create a couple catalogs for us to use, a dev catalog, a stage catalog, and a prod catalog. And it'll create a volume within each of those catalogs, and then some files for us to use, some CSV files. So again, give this about 1 or 2 minutes. Once you run this once for the lab, you shouldn't have to run it again while we're letting it run. If you do end the lab, this does clear everything out. So if you come back in, tomorrow, you will have to rerun this to set up your environment, because when you end the lab, it does clear out. So just be aware of that. Again, it takes about 1 to 2 minutes. So we'll just wait here and it will magically be done. All right, it's magically done. Again, about 2 minutes. And if you scroll down in the notes, you don't really have to read the notes. We just want to see course setup complete. And then down here, we see main catalog reference. So if we use the variable da.catalog name, it should point to this, which should match our compute name. So I will just run this cell here, and we can see it should all match. I will go to my catalogs real quick to the left. And what this did was created multiple catalogs for us to use throughout this course. So be aware, and we'll take a look at those in a little bit. For now, we want to look at this main catalog, da.catalog name, will point to mine. All of you will have a different lab user name. So next, we're going to build a pipeline just using some traditional Spark code. So we're going to ingest some CSV files, create a bronze table, a silver table, and a gold table. So typically when you start with a project, you'll work in a Scratch folder, a Scratch notebook, just to explore your data, kind of see what you have to do and more. So this is a simple example. And our primary focus really will be on the process here of modularizing code rather than the code itself. So let's start by previewing the dev health CSV file from the health volume under our catalog. So if I expand my main catalog, not these that we'll use later, and I expand default and then health, I'll see this like dev health CSV file. This is kind of my development CSV file that we can use and play with and test. So I'll just run this code here using a simple query to just preview that data, that CSV file. Here we can see, again, it's a simple CSV file, few columns, and I think there's 7,500 rows. The one row is the header here since we read it in as text. Again, we're not really too concerned about the data or the process, really just the modularization of code, right? We assume some PySpark and SQL knowledge coming in. So the next step is we want to ingest the CSV file, create a bronze table, and then create a bronze table using a schema, and then take the bronze table and create a silver table with these 2 new columns, high, Celeste, and age. And we're going to take those and make them into groups or categoricals. We'll drop the metadata columns from the bronze table, save the data frame, as a table in our catalog. And then we're going to create this gold table that we'll use later for a visualization. But again, this is just kind of development, exploring, testing our data, testing our pipeline. In the end, at the end of this course, we will migrate this code to a DLT pipeline. So just follow along and we'll get to that point. But for now, we're just in development mode. And real quick, I'm not going to go into depth into this PySpark code or SQL code. PySpark and SQL is assumed coming into this course. Real quick, I'll start by importing my required packages, CSV to bronze. So here, my schema, my path, volumes, data catalog, right? My catalog is over here, getting that data. Here, I will read it in as the health raw or my health bronze. Here's the schema, loading the data, my metadata columns. Then I'll write that to a table called health dev or health bronze dev. I'll reference that delta table. Then I'll create a silver table. We'll create a high cholesterol group column. 0 is normal, 1 is above average, 2 is high. Do the same thing with age group. We'll drop the metadata columns for the silver table. Again, we're not going too in-depth in the PySpark code at all. Again, very, very simple example here. We'll then take that health silver data frame, and actually we're rewriting this code we wrote above to save a data frame as a delta table, but we did that and called it health silver. And then we have a SQL query here within spark.sql to create the summarization. And then we'll just view the results here. So again, let me just kind of start while this is running. So we just wrote all this code. I want you all to look at this, and who's done this before this way? I'm raising my hand. I've done it before, not a big deal. We're writing all our code. But again, this is a very simple example. You can start to think if this project is more complex, this code would become more complex. And then to maintain this code, you would have to dive into all these random parts to figure out where things are being done. So again, this is our non-modularized code, not really too focused on the code itself, really the process of what we're about to do. And this is about done. So while we're waiting, what we're going to do is modularize the PySpark code from above. And modularizing our code is going to really improve the maintainability, the reusability, and how we're going to collaborate by really breaking down the code we saw into just really smaller functions, far more maintainable parts. So let's dive in, and what we're going to do here, again, there's a variety of techniques we can use. This is a very, very simple example. Here we're going to use get health schema to get the schema, read health data to read the CSV files. Here's my 2 mapping column functions or column transforms. Save to delta, which we actually wrote twice from above. We'll create a function for it. And then get cholesterol, age, ag, create our gold table. So again, we'll go down here, but this time we'll create a function called def get health schema. We'll just return the schema. Read health data is just going to return the data frame from the ingesting of the CSV. Here we're loading the schema. We will actually load the schema. So this is the old code. What we actually want to do is paste this code. Oh, no, we are good. We have the code here. We have schema, so we'll use this in the function. High cholesterol map, give it a column, it'll transform it. Same with group ages map. Here's our save df to delta, and then my get cholesterol age ag. So we've broken down that bigger cell into multiple functions that we can utilize and place around, and we'll do that throughout this course. So again, now I could build another function that puts all these together. Just for simplicity, I'm not going to do that. But in this case, we are achieving the same thing we did at the beginning, but this time we have the read health data to read the CSV file, put it in here, save to delta. We'll take the health CSV bronze read, save it to the bronze dev. Silver, we'll take the bronze, and again, just go through, do our mapping. Down here, we'll save that to delta. Get cholesterol age ag. Down here, we'll get our summarization. And then we will just run all of this. Actually, we have to run the first one. And then we will run this as well. And this, again, is completing the same thing we did as above, but now as modularized functions. So when that is done, we'll give it a second. And then we're just going to view each of the tables we created with these functions here, which are the same ones we did at the beginning. So we'll first run this, which will just look at the health bronze dev data. So the original read. And again, it's just simple data. We're not really too focused on the data here. But if we scroll to the right, we can see our metadata columns. 7,500 rows is what we expect. We'll read the health silver data. Again, we're not cleaning everything in this. That's not the point of this course. We're just going to focus on these processes. So here we've removed the metadata columns for our silver table and we created these 2 new columns, right? We still have some nulls and stuff we probably should fix, but in this case, we're just focusing on these 2 new columns. And then we're going to do the col age ag dev table. And this is going to aggregate the high cholesterol group with the age group that we saw above. And again, some aggregation on our dev data. I go to my catalog, again, not the dev stage or prod one. This is just a quick introduction. You go here, we should have our 3 tables that we just previewed. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to clean this up. Again, we're just testing things. I don't really need those tables anymore, so I'm just going to run this function to delete them. Refresh the page. And there we go. So that's our first demo. Again, a very, very, very simple introduction to modularizing PySpark code. But again, really think about this as you start developing your projects. Instead of writing these big, long scripts, how can you sit there, put a plan in place, and modularize your code? And as you'll see why that is very important, which will introduce it into our kind of CI/CD pipelines for unit tests, integration tests, and down the line. So thanks for watching. See you in the next demo.